Good afternoon. First and foremost, I would like to extend a warm welcome to His Excellency the Ambassador and Permanent Delegate of Indonesia to UNESCO, Mr. Muhammad Umar, the Head of the Agency for Language Development and Cultivation, Mr. Aminuddin Aziz, Excellencies, the Ambassadors and esteemed representatives of UNESCO delegations, and honorable speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests and distinguished speakers, welcome to our roundtable discussion, The Shaping of Modern Indonesia, Thinking Indonesia with A.A. Navis. This event is part of the Festival of the Archipelago and commemorates the 100th anniversary of the esteemed Indonesian writer and cultural icon A.A. Navis. Thank you for joining us today in honoring the legacy of A.A. Navis. We are gathered here to reflect on Indonesia's development through the perspective of politics, ideology, and literature. Central theme of A.A. Navis explored passionately in his work. His insights continue to inspire us in understanding Indonesia's journey as a modern nation. To start our event, please enjoy a traditional opening dance performance by Panca Indra Group, celebrating the vibrant culture and heritage of Indonesia. We invite you to immerse yourself in the Rantak dance, a stunning traditional performance from West Sumatra, Indonesia, the homeland of A.A. Navis. This dance artfully combines the energetic movement of pencaksilat martial art with the rich storytelling of Minangkabau culture. The dance reflects the resilient spirit of the Minangkabau people, radiating both strength and elegance. Each movement serves as a powerful testament to that values of balance, respect, and harmony with nature. Rantak dance is more than just a dance. It is a vibrant homage of the Indonesian heritage that safeguards the enduring legacy of Minangkabau tradition for generations to come. Thus, I would like to invite our dancers to astound us with Rantak dance. Please enjoy. our dancers. Such amazing performance. Before we dive into our event this afternoon, we now move to our opening remarks. We shall start with speech by the head of the Agency for Language Development and Cultivation, Mr. Aminuddin Aziz. Without further ado, I want to welcome the head of the Agency for Language Development and Cultivation, Mr. Aminuddin Aziz.
Selamat sore, Yang Mulia Duta Besar dan Bertugas Penuh Republik Indonesia untuk Prancis, merangkap Wakil Tetap Republik Indonesia untuk di UNESCO, Yang Mulia Bapak Muhammad Umar, Yang Mulia para Wakil Negara Sahabat di UNESCO, yang terhormat para narasumber diskusi, Bapak Dr. Hilmar Farid, Ibu Ayu Utami, dan Profesor Romain Bertrand, hadirin yang berbahagia. Merupakan sebuah kebahagiaan dan kehormatan bagi saya mewakili pemerintah Republik Indonesia, khususnya Kementerian Pendidikan Dasar dan Menengah, untuk berada di sini bersama Anda semua untuk memperingati 100 tahun kelahiran sastrawan Ali Akbar Navis, atau lebih dikenal dengan nama A.A. Navis. Peringatan ini merupakan salah satu agenda UNESCO, sebagaimana telah tercantum pada Celebration of Anniversaries UNESCO tahun 2024-2025. A.A. Navis adalah seorang sastrawan Indonesia yang secara konsisten mengungkapkan gagasan-gagasannya yang luhur dalam karya-karya sastra yang bernilai tinggi. Navis memaknai secara kritis pengamatannya terhadap lingkungan sosial dan kultural, baik di tempat kelahirannya maupun di Indonesia pada umumnya, dan menuliskannya secara elegan dalam karya-karyanya. Peringatan 100 tahun kelahiran A.A. Navis dilaksanakan di Indonesia dan Prancis. Di Indonesia, peringatan A.A. Navis dilangsungkan sepanjang tahun di seluruh provinsi di Indonesia, dimulai dari Provinsi Sumatera Barat, tempat kelahiran A.A. Navis. Orang dewasa diajak untuk mengenang dan memaknai kembali kekaryaan A.A. Navis, dan para murid sekolah diajak untuk lebih mengenal sastrawan dan kesusastraan di negaranya. Kami juga menerbitkan buku yang berisi kumpulan tulisan dari puluhan orang penulis yang mengkaji secara kritis pemikiran dan visi budaya Ali Akbar Navis, selain menerjemahkan karya-karya terpilih A.A. Navis. Selanjutnya, di Prancis, peringatan 100 tahun kelahiran A.A. Navis dilaksanakan 2 kali, yaitu hari ini di sini, di Markas Besar UNESCO, dan di Universitas La Rochelle besok hari. Universitas La Rochelle adalah salah satu universitas di Prancis yang mengajarkan bahasa Indonesia. Semoga hadirin dapat mengikuti dan menikmati gelar wicara hari ini yang akan menyajikan kajian tentang pemikiran A.A. Navis sebagaimana tertuang dalam karya-karyanya, dalam kaitannya dengan kehidupan pada masanya, dan kehidupan kekinian. Semoga hadirin semakin mengenal sosok, karya, dan pemikiran A.A. Navis, khususnya, dan hazanah sastra Indonesia pada umumnya, sebagai kontribusi Indonesia bagi peradaban dunia. Sampai jumpa pada peringatan-peringatan berikutnya. Tahun depan sudah teragendakan peringatan kelahiran Kemalahayati, seorang laksamana wanita dari Aceh, Indonesia. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to represent the Ministry of Primary and Secondary Education of the Republic of Indonesia to have you in this jointly organized agenda to celebrate the centennial anniversary of an Indonesian writer, A.A. Navis. An interesting fact about Navis is that his works, to a great extent, reflects his critical, often satirical views on his sociocultural surroundings, as you can observe in the book that we provide, containing some selected works of Ali Akbar Navis. Prior to this Navis celebration in Paris, a series of events were held to commemorate his centennial anniversary all over Indonesia. A book was also published to explore how Navis views the world, Tomorrow, there will also be an event on Navis at La Rochelle University, which has offered the teaching of Bahasa Indonesia for quite some time. I hope you enjoy this event, which will discuss different views of Navis works and life. See you in the forthcoming events. Next year, there will be a celebration of Kamala Hayati, a prominent woman admiral who in the 16th century served the Aceh Sultanate, which ruled the modern area of Aceh province, Indonesia. Enjoy, and thank you to all of the audience, particularly the plenipotentiary ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to France and the permanent representative of the Republic of Indonesia to UNESCO, Ambassador Muhammad Umar, for his presence. I would also like to thank the three panelists for the discussion, the historian Hilmar Farid, the writer Ayu Utami, and Professor Romain Bertrand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aminuddin Aziz, for a warm welcome. I too hope that we can celebrate each writer here in France and also in Indonesia. Dear distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite to the stage the Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to the French Republic, the Principality of Andorra, the Principality of Monaco, and the Permanent Delegate of Republic of Indonesia to UNESCO, His Excellency Muhammad Umar. Your Excellency, Mr. Muhammad Umar, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, Ambassadors, Permanent Delegates, also representatives of members of UNESCO. And special welcome to Bapak Aminuddin. Just gave his remarks, Bapak Hilmar Farid, Director Jenderal for Culture of Indonesia, the outstanding speakers who will be joining us soon, Mr. Romain Bertrand, the Director of Research of Sciences Po, Paris, and also Ibu Ayu Utami, one of Indonesia's most outstanding writer. Esteemed guests, friends of Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great honor that I stand before you today to commemorate the centenary of one of Indonesia's celebrated literary figure, Ali Akbar Navis, oftenly known as A.A. or A.A. Navis. This anniversary, marking the 100 years since his birth, was officially recognized by UNESCO during the 42nd session of its General Conference last November. And as we gather here as part of the Festival of Archipelago that the Embassy organized this year, we not only celebrate a remarkable writer, but also a visionary humanist whose contribution to literature and society continue to resonate with us all. Navis was not merely a storyteller. He was a keen observer of the human condition, an astute critic of societal norms, and a champion of cultural identity. Through his words and writing, he painted vivid portraits of Indonesian life, deftly weaving together themes of morality, community, and the complexities of our shared humanity. In his work, he challenges us to reflect on our responsibilities to one another, urging us to look beyond our pious facades to address the needs of the marginalized. As we honor Navis' legacy today, we also recognize the profound impact he has had in literature, not only in Indonesia, but also around the globe. His works have transcended borders, translated into multiple languages, and continue to inspire readers and writers alike. He was a mentor to many, nurturing the next generation of Indonesian authors and encouraging them to voice their thoughts and challenge the status quo. His belief that literature is a tool for critical thinking and self-expression is a lesson that remains vital in our ever-evolving world. Today we are here not just to celebrate a literary icon, but to engage in meaningful discussions about his enduring legacy and the relevance of his insights in our contemporary society. As we explore the themes present in Navis' works, we are reminded of our collective responsibility in this organization to foster a culture of open dialogue, creativity, and empathy. I would like, therefore, to extend my gratitude to all of you for joining us today in this celebration. And together, let us honor his memory by continuing to champion the values he stood for: critical inquiry, social justice, and the celebration of cultural diversity. And as we embark on this journey of reflection and discussion, may they inspire you as they have inspired countless others. And may a Navis spirit of inquiry and creativity continue to illuminate our paths. As we embark on this journey of reflection and discussion, may this work inspire you as they have inspired countless others. I thank you very much once again for your meaningful contribution.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for your cordial greeting. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have a special introduction to A.A. Navis by none other than his own family member, Mrs. Gemala Ranti Navis. Ibu Ranti will share a personal view of Navis' legacy and contribution to Indonesian literature and thought. May I now kindly invite Ibu Gemala Ranti Navis for your introduction.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Honorable Head Agency for Language Development and Cultivation, UNESCO, His Excellency Ambassador of the Republic of Indonesia to France, Bapak Muhammad Umar, the Head of Language Agency of Indonesia Culture, Bapak Aminuddin Aziz, Bapak Hilmar Farid, Ibu Ayu Utami, Prof. Romain Bertrand, all the UNESCO permanent delegation, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Gemala Ranti, the fifth child of A.A. Navis, and child of the trust of the A.A. Navis Foundation. The foundation 2 years ago to continuous contributing to effort to increase literature thought the word of A.A. Navis. I am here flying from Jakarta with my two sisters, Lenggo Geni and Rika Anggraini. Thank you. Together, they take part in the 100th anniversary of A.A. Navis. Thank you for the invitation from the Language Agency Culture from me, representing the family to give the speak today. A.A. Navis, or Ali Akbar Navis, was born in Padang Panjang, West Sumatra, on November 1792-24. He is not only known as a satirical writer who question various social life of society, but also as an activist, culture observer, political and educator. There are even those who call him intellectual par excellence and culture fins. The short story Robohnya Surau Kami is A.A. Navis' most phenomenal and widely known work, which has been read, discussed and performed hundreds of times and has become a research source for this and other scientific work. Not only did all Surau collapse, all of his work was good literature and essay have become important materials in the journal and in literature and culture in Indonesia. In 1968, the novel Saraswati Si Gadis Dalam Sunyi was selected as the first winner of a novel writing competition organized by UNESCO and IKAPI. Furthermore, in 1975, the short story Jodoh won the Kincer Emas Award from Radio Nederland Waardenprop. From the work of A.A. Navis, the fifth President of Republic of Indonesia, Abdurrahman Wahid, stated, the social demand he raised are what make Navis' work of fiction become very valuable social documentation material in the development of our literature. A.A. Navis is humorist, satirist, and democratist. He doesn't want to move to Jakarta because he feels that the region alone can become big. Dream of make the region bigger. Writer who dare to think differently from most people, but are also open to criticism and different of opinion. We were raised in the democratic, the critical, sensitive, self-confident and atmosphere, and are strong individual who care about others. Our family values are built from A.A. Navis' life experience, such as almost being impression because of the work, the habit of dialogue within the family about social, political, economic, and social issues. All of these are family values that are truly proud of and grateful for. Therefore, we are truly honored and proud when UNESCO celebrates 100 years of A.A. Navis. Navis thought with a local Minangkabau culture background are expressed in various literary and scientific work and become thought at the national and international level. Language agency in Indonesia organize event and critical and creative space for the younger generation to translate A.A. Navis thought in the series of 100 years of A.A. Navis. For the reason, on behalf behalf of the extended family of the late A.A. Navis, 8 children, 70 grandchildren, and 40 great-grandchildren, I express my deepest gratitude to UNESCO, the Indonesian government, the parties involved in the 100 A.A. Navis celebration in Indonesia and today in Paris. This moment is an extraordinary tribute by the country, UNESCO, and the world to our father. Hopefully, A.A. Navis thought we remain eternal, even though the date 21 years ago. Thank you, merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Mrs. Gemalaranti Navis, for that heartfelt introduction to your father's work and life, which will always live on in our hearts. His impact indeed resonates deeply with us today. Thus, with that, we shall start our roundtable discussion, The Shaping of Modern Indonesia, Thinking Indonesia with A.A. Navis. I would like to give the floor to our moderator to lead the discussion, Monsieur Romain Bertrand. As a brief introduction, Monsieur Romain Bertrand is a research director at the National Foundation of Political Science, SciencePo, where he has served since 2008. He has completed his PhD in political science at SciencePo in 2000, having joined the CERI in 2001. Monsieur Bertrand has held research positions at Kebangsaan University Malaysia and Oxford, and has been a visiting professor at Fudan University and the New School for Social Research. Monsieur Romain Bertrand, you have the lead. I also invite the Madam Ayu Utami to enjoy the stage.
Well, I am most happy to chair this roundtable set up on the occasion of the commemoration of the 100th birthday of Ali Akbar Navis. And tonight we'll try to explore both Navis' specific literary world and the overall relationship between culture, literature, and society in contemporary Indonesia. And to do this, we have the pleasure to welcome two outstanding figures of Indonesia's cultural scene, namely Ayu Utami, most famous writer whose novel Saman, released in 1998, did set new standards for the engagement of Indonesian culture with the Western world, and Hilmar Farid, historian by training, cultural activist by vocation, and acting Director General of Culture at the Ministry of Education. So to start our discussion, I'd like to ask you a very simple question. When and how did you first encounter Navis' work, and what is for you the place that he has or that he deserves in the history of Indonesian literature? Ayu, would you start?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, Navis was taught at school. When I was a student at junior high school, I started to learn Indonesian literature, and at the same time, I also started to learn the history of the French Revolution. So at that time, we have to remember, I started to memorize these names of the figures of the French Revolution, like Robespierre, Danton, Marat, and also King Louis XVI, the 14th, Marie Antoinette. At the same time, when I started to memorize Indonesian literature, and among of them, was Ali Akbar Navis. So for me, memorizing these names, I started to memorize the names of the figures of the French Revolution together with the names of Indonesian literature. And I remember it's very difficult to pronounce this, the French names and the French slogan like L'état c'est moi and Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, and all this. And we have to pronounce it difficult, very difficult. But for me, it's the comparison is very interesting because I found the history of the French Revolution very interesting because there are many actions full of bloodshed, head chops. While the Indonesian literature is not taught as interesting as the French Revolution. No pictures, no paintings. With the French Revolution, we remind these paintings of Eugène Delacroix, of the death of Marat by Jacques Louis David. Yeah? So it's very vivid. Unfortunately, the Indonesian literature was not taught in a vividly way. While it should be very interesting, actually. So my first introduction to Ali Akbar Navis is when I was in the in the junior high school. But I think what I want to say is that at that time, I didn't have a slight criticism and ask the question why I should learn French history. Why do I should learn the French revolution while the French do not have to learn Indonesia's revolution? That doesn't come up with my mind, but I think this is a big question and it would relate to many other questions. But my point is that because actually later I realized my discovery of Ali Akbar Navis later take a gradual step. Yeah, I have to say that the way it is taught at school is not very vivid. So I think Indonesian students have to gradually realize how important Ali Akbar Navis later on. I think Fai will agree with me. Yeah? When we got it at school, it was not very interesting. So this is also actually a proposal to Pak Kaban to give attention to the way Indonesian literature being taught at school. So actually, and then there was also another interesting point because my teacher said that the Ali Akbar Navis work, the most famous one, the collapse of our mosque, was a controversial work. And I also didn't ask the question why it was taught at school while it is controversial. So I was not very critical at that time. Yeah, I think when I was a kid, I should have asked these two questions. Why Indonesians should learn the French Revolution, and the second, why Ali Akbar Navis' controversial story was taught at school. And then only later I gradually studied something. When I was at the university, there was, I think you also remember this, there was a big cultural congress, Congress Kebudayaan, yeah. And then at that time, I think I started to be aware of the the polemics in literature that take place in the Indonesian literature history. And I just realized that Ali Akbar Navis' work was taught, despite it is said to be controversial, but Pramoedya Anantatur and Sitor Situmorang, who was well known in outside Indonesia, were not taught at school. Only that time I realized that there are some censorship at schools, and Ali Akbar Navis was not affiliated to any radical ideologies. He was not affiliated to communism. He was not affiliated to Islam, radical Islam either. So at that time, I just realized that during the Suharto time, actually the controversy about the collapse of our mosque has receded. But what I want to say is that it took, I learned about his importance later on. And there are many things, there are many interesting things about Ali Akbar Navis. But I can talk a lot about this, so I have to stop here first.
Don't worry, we still have some time left. Hilmar, what would be your answer about this first encounter with Navis' work and what he represents? Or?
Well, my first encounter with Navis was, of course, the very famous short story, The Collapse of Our Mosque. But it was a very innocent relation in the beginning, because I didn't know the historical context. I didn't know much about who Navis was at that time. So I just read it. But I also read works by Seno Gumira Ajidharma, much crazier than Navis in terms of like thinking, etc. So I first considered just a normal short story, which is interesting, important, but not that outstanding. Until then, because I studied history when I was at university, I began to understand the historical context of it. It was written in 1956. Only a few, like almost a decade more from the Indonesian independence, right? So it was a very interesting period of history. Yeah, there was a political turmoil. West Sumatra, where Navis was born, began to criticize the central government, and then in 1958 there was a rebellion and all that. So that was the historical context. And I found it interesting because Minangkabau is known for its strict adherence to Islam, right? And you have here a short story very critical of how religion was practiced in the society. Yeah, the story, the collapse of the mosque, of our mosque, was simply a story, very interesting story actually, of an elderly man whose job was to look after the mosque. And then he encountered this young man named Ajo Sidi. And Ajo Sidi told the old man, the elderly man, a story that he heard of another old man who was a very pious Muslim, yeah. But when he died, he met with God. And God actually said that, no, all of your life you spent like praying to me, while your role is expected to have a more social relation with others, to look after others. So you are not, you are now condemned to hell because of that. So Ajo Sidi told the elderly guy that story, and this elderly man got frustrated because he spent all his life, yeah, in the homage to God by looking after the mosque, and then he killed himself. So that idea itself, suicide, is not welcomed in Islam, right? To put that in a story, get it published in 1956, in a society where Islam basically is the majority, like that's already something. So it also shows the standpoint of Navis as an intellectual. Yeah, he wears his heart on his sleeves, basically, and you can see in his interaction, his writings, etc., very critical of the situation of the society where he is in. So that was my first encounter with Navis. Second encounter when I came across his work, Alam Terkembang Jadi Guru. It's basically an encyclopedia of Minangkabau culture. And there are some very interesting works by Indonesian scholars about their respective, like their original culture. And Navis and Minangkabau is one very important book. And yeah, so here we are looking at Navis, a very daring writer taking up very difficult issues in a society back in the 1950s, but at the same time contributes a lot to a better understanding of Minangkabau society. So for me, he's a complete intellectual in a way. You know? And yeah, that's, I think, also the reason why now here commemorating the centenary of this great literary figure.
Thank you. So, as you were just reminding us, Navis is born in the 1920s under Dutch colonial rule, and he starts writing by the early mid-50s, that's to say right after the end of the physical revolution and the accession of Indonesia to independence, in a decade that actually is a politically very intense, sensitive, troubled period. So in Western Sumatra, there is the revolutionary government that will finally be set up in 1958. There are also huge irredentist Islamic movements like the Darul Islam in Java. And as you said, Navis did portray these troubled times in his short novels, his Cerpen, especially in one very moving one, also released in 1956 and called Maria, which is about the death of a young woman who wished to emancipate herself from a number of very virilistic behaviors in her own West Sumatran society, and she becomes acquainted with a man who will actually take side in the quasi-civil war leading up to the institution, the creation of the revolutionary government in West Sumatra. And when this guy is shot down, she goes to the grave with him, so to speak, and she's also shot down, and their corpses are put in the Antokan River. So there is a quite tragic dimension to the kind of political reporting skills that Navis did exhibit. And do you think that such political reporting abilities, so the question is for both of you, of course, are still part of Indonesian literature today? And do you think that writing is still today, as we speak today, something of a political commitment, or does it have to be a political commitment also in Indonesia? So this intricate relationship between, so to say, politics, engagement, and literature, what would you say it has become in Indonesia today? And is it part of the legacy of Navis to force us to think about this?
You want to go first? No. Okay. So, as you said, Navis belongs to a generation of writers. They were born in the 1920s, and very interesting in an historical context, because this is the second generation of writers of Indonesian modern literature. He is of the generation of great literary figures, Mokhtar Lubis, 1922, Khairul Anwar, Minang himself, 1922, Navis 1924, Situs Tomarang also this year, Pramudia Anantatur next year, 1925. So it's the generation of intellectuals and writers who were very active. And what is interesting about their work, they've been very critical of the Indonesian Revolution. I mean, if you look at their writings, late 1940s, early 1950s, I mean, all you find is that reflection. What is this war for? Like very anti-war. While you would expect people of that generation being in their 20s and 1940s, that they would have this revolutionary fervor and all that. But in fact, what you find in their works is a very critical reflection on that. And as you said, I mean, that's I think, later inherited in a way by a younger generation of writers born in the 40s, etc., and down to Ayu Utama for sure. But I think they have a different take when you look at issues that they emerge. In the 1940s or 50s, when Navis wrote his short stories and also novels, I mean, it's very much on the issue of, like, where is this nation going, into what direction? And there were, as you know, in the 1950s, there were competing ideas about where Indonesia should go to, right? I think in the 1980s and 90s, you had different issues. Indonesia is a fact. I mean, you need to rethink every time, reevaluate. You put in more ideas, modern ideas, new ideas, and so on. But I think it has a different take when it comes to questioning the Indonesian nation. Yeah, 90s and 2000 and up to now, people begin to think, what is the place for women in this society, in the context of the Indonesian nation, people with disabilities, crazy people, insanity, like all these questions, I think, of what is the Indonesian nation composed of. So that's the big question, and I think until today, I mean, you have like a new generation of writers, Eka Kurniawan, etc., taking up all these like important issues in their own way, and yeah. It's a very diverse body of literature. I mean, you have like different views. And what is interesting today is that you get more and more people writing from the margins, quote unquote, like not from the center of Jakarta, Bandung, etc., but from the provinces, from the different islands, and a completely different view on what the Indonesian nation is. But the question, a big question remains, what is Indonesia like, and where is it going to, and into what direction?
Yeah, I completely agree with Farid, because nowadays we go more to the periphery. But I think back to Navis, I think he has some important position that I think many people do not realize it. I would like to compare Navis with Pramudia again and Sitor Situmorang with regards of kind of cosmopolitanism or universalism. It's a perennial issue actually in Indonesia. But to give you a simple example, I have to say that when I first encountered with Ali Akbar Navis, I was not very much interested in it. Why? Because as a city girl, Ali Akbar Navis' short stories are for me too local, too parochial. It's about the village of Sumatra. My orientation as Jakarta girl was not village of Sumatra. My dream is Paris, because I learned about the French Revolution with Jacques David, all these pictures. I love paintings. So my dream is London, Paris, Amsterdam. Yeah. Only later, gradually, I realized that I am a victim of this cosmopolitan desire. And actually, these issues about cosmopolitanism or universalism is a perennial issue in Indonesian literature, not necessarily in the works of fictions or poems or novels, but also in the debates. In the 1930s, there was a debate about whether Indonesia should be catching up, having a new identity, and catching up with the West, or to create a mixed identity with the past glory, That was in the 1930s. In the 1950s, there was a manifesto, a statement by Khairil Anwar, Asrul Sani, some writers and artists, claiming that we are the heir of the world culture. It is a statement of universalism. In the 1960s, there is a debate between humanisme universal atau universal humanism against the social humanism. And in the 1980s, there is also another debate about universalism and contextualism. In a sense that actually, if you see the debates, not the works, but the debates, the critics of art and literature in Indonesia, the awareness that behind a cosmopolitanism or an ideal of universalism, there is a domination of the West. And I just realized it later on. Yeah. So I just started to answer the question why I should have to learn the French Revolution, which I like, but why should I have to? There is a kind of this universalism. And it's interesting to see the position or the take of Pramudia, Sitor, and Navis in these issues. In Pramudia, I think, in Pramudia you see that there is a desire of the natives to unite with the colonizers, the natives with the Europeans or the Eurasians, but it was then doomed by the colonial structure. I think it is interesting that Pramudia's position is clear. I mean, he described the desire, and the analysis is that we have to fight against the colonialism. Sitor Sutumorang's position is more ambiguous. He doesn't really he doesn't really clearly, like Pramudia, in his poems, showing his anti-colonialism. Instead, in his poems, the European landscape, the Paris landscape, and the betrayal of the native, there was a depiction about the betrayal and the sexual or sensual relation between the man and the European woman. So the desire is there with all this ambiguity expressed in a very beautifully way in Sitor Situmorang. While Navis, what is interesting about Navis is that he doesn't touch all of this. His stories, I think it is his decision to really write a very parochial, very local stories. And I think this is a kind of statement regarding this cosmopolitanism, that it is him who liberates himself from the desire of cosmopolitanism. So I think only later I realized that he has his, what I thought when I was a teenager as something not interesting, actually is a very interesting decision. Because when Pramudia is very anti-colonial, Farid is critical, Sitor is very artistic and ambiguous. Navis suggests another route, which is detachment or disinterestedness of cosmopolitanism. And I think this is a very important position that he can suggest or propose. So it's a slap on my face. I realize that I am the victim of cosmopolitanism, and I think I learned from Navis, and also, but there's other interesting thing about Navis, but we can talk about it later. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think this regarding politics is not only he criticizing the government, but he actually by using his humor and all, I mean, most of his short stories are not about war. Yeah, it's more about daily life. So by using these stories about daily life, actually he says something. He has a political position, which is, for me, balancing myself between Pramudia's way and Sitor Sutumorang's way. And Navis is, I really think that I have to, I gradually realized this importance of Navis throughout my life.
It seems to me that in a sense what you're, both of you are touching upon is the back and forth movement between city-oriented and village-based imaginings at play in Indonesian literature. And in the case of Navis, in a sense, it's very parochial. It's always taking place in his hometown, but it's turning ordinary folks into kind of living embodiments of larger national ideological forces. In some short stories, there is almost a rejection of the global, so to speak, for the global. It's Orang dari Luar Negeri, when those 1950s, 60s Minang expatriates come back to the village, try to, kind of to play the big man, but can't in the end find their place in this society. So in a sense, it's local, it's parochial, it's village-based, but universalism comes through these little folks turn into, standing for larger political or ideological forces. Would you say that today, in the world of both literature and the arts in Indonesia, this question of the relationship between the local and the global, or between the regional, like you were telling about what is now periphery-based, writing traditions, is still very much a question, an issue for writers, performers, that it still inspires a way of writing about Indonesia. Because in a sense you were suggesting something. It's that because he didn't want to touch precisely upon this, false urban-based idealistic cosmopolitanism, in a sense is a decolonial writer. He was already out of the colonial issue precisely by turning back to the local. Is this kind of questions today in Indonesia still an issue?
I think it's a minor issue, because I think I remember then, go back to myself, when I started to write my novel in Saman was in 1998, and then it followed by a number of other women writers from the city, and journalists called us cynically sastrawangi, fragrant literature. I think it's meant to be cynical, but I think it described a new generation who didn't came from the village. See, Abdul Ali Akbar Navis, all of the Indonesian writers before are male from the village or from the small city. Only Sono Gumira, who was born in Boston. The other was born in the village. So what I want to say is that there is a change in the population too, because people started to, now I think more people live in the city. Yeah, so change from the urban to the city. So I think these days, one of the consequences of a city person is that you are connected. You are like born with the cosmopolitan ideas. So cosmopolitanism is not the problem like it used to be, because it is like natural, so natural that we need criticism. Nowadays, I mean, if you see poets, there are lots of poets. There are also poets. Poets. There are also poets whose work always involved the like Sitor Timorang. Yeah, I mean it was followed by younger writers. They like to make poetry with travel poetry with landscape of Europe, of landscape of a foreign land. Only a few numbers will be like Navis, very parochial. One of them is Joko Pinurbo. Joko Pinurbo his poem is all about his house and the garden. So it's very close. So and if you see my generation, all writes about other countries, and even there was one time a trend in Indonesian novels to describe a success story, and a success story means that a village probably from who can go abroad either to Europe or to United States or to Egypt and then go back to Indonesia and still become Indonesia, still religious, still retaining his identity. So this is a trend in the 2000, the first decade of 2000. Yeah. So cosmopolitanism is there, but it's not as problematic as in the time of Navis. And if you also compare with the development in the visual arts, in the dance, it is because we are now working in a network of festivals. So this cosmopolitanism is there, but not as there are more network between the South and South. So it's not like colonial time anymore.
I think you raised a very important and interesting question. Like global is normally associated with modernity, right? I mean, how did people in Indonesia at the time, in the 50s, 60s, encountered modernity? And what is interesting from Navis, and I think intellectuals in Minangkabau, in West Sumatra, is that Europe is not the only source of modernity. I mean, they had a centuries long relationship with the Islamic world. Ahmad Khatib al-Minangkabawi was the Grand Mufti of the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca at the turn of the 20th century. Islamic thinking, modern Islamic thinking was like widespread back in the 18th, 19th century. So that, and when the Dutch came, there was an interesting response to that kind of a global influence. And what is, I think, what I found very interesting is the ways people translate back that international exposure to their national or local work, including language, etc. And I think Navis here is a very interesting example on how he, from his parochial viewpoint, that actually portrays a very dynamic society, but from the standpoint of a person that with local experience or local viewpoint. But again, and if you look at the work of people today in literature, in the arts, etc., you have also a completely different relationship with the outside world. Migrants, like you have a large migrant literature in Indonesia, people working in Hong Kong and different parts of the world as migrant workers, expressing themselves in arts and literature. So I think the conventional understanding of people in the ex-colonies responding to global modernity is a kind of a narrow I would say, like perspective, because the experience is so rich. I mean, like different layers and different encounters with different types of modernity. So what I would say is that we are always talking about cosmopolitanism, modernity, etc., in the plural, because you have so many different types of that. And yeah, I mean, until today, people are still struggling with these issues, yeah, at different levels. But I think the experiences are also very diverse. I mean, now there is a new generation of young writers who are taking up global issues like climate. Yeah, very different from my generation, or even like Navis and the others. And you can see there are interesting responses and different forms of expression that I think are very important and interesting to look at. Yeah.
Well, in a sense, what you're saying is that to switch back to the local doesn't mean to switch back to the parochial, because the local, is already global in the sense that it has been textured by centuries of long-distance relationships through the Indian Ocean world.
Yeah, I mean, like farmer families of rural people in East Nusa Tenggara are much more exposed to global modernity than some of us were living in the kampungs of Jakarta. Yeah, because of that experience. So I think that distinction that we make, traditional, rural, etc., doesn't really work in this context. Yeah.
Ayu, you were actually talking about 1998, and I guess the very first time I heard about your work was in either March or April 1998, precisely, through Utankayu Theatre People. And at the time that your manuscript was already, the manuscript of your novel, Saman, was already circulating, but it had not yet been published. And you reminded me that it was to be released precisely on the tragic day of the Trisakti shooting tragedy. This was in '98, and here we are today, in a sense, when someone in the memory of the people of your generation and mine, being closely associated with the former New Order regime, has just been elected as the President of the Republic of Indonesia. It cannot come as being quite of a surprise when you think about what Indonesia has been through in the past decades. The man may have changed, the country may have changed, but what would you say that for you as a writer, as a cultural activist, was this can mean that in 2024, we're in a sense back to before '98?
Well, actually, I supported Jokowi twice. And at that time, he was against Prabowo. And now Prabowo became our president because of Jokowi. So, I mean, I don't know what happened. I mean, I think I don't want to comment about that, because I support Jokowi because I didn't want to have Prabowo. Now, Prabowo is my president because of Jokowi. So anyway, I think I don't want to talk about the big or the top, because I think it is important to see what can we do and what can we see in the more lower level, not lower, but yeah, more practical level. Like I think. I think I'm happy with the Minister of Education, high and the basic. Yeah, I'm happy, and then I know the Minister of Culture. Actually, we were from the same university, and I believe that he has a genuine cultural interest. So I rather see what positive things that we can have, rather than thinking about, oh, my president was the person who was responsible for this and that. And I think if we talk about the democratic backsliding, it happened not only in Indonesia, and it happened in Indonesia not only now. I mean, if you want to call it this way, I think one of the signs of democratic backsliding is the weakening of the Commission of Corruption Eradication. So yeah, we live in a it is in signs of democratic backsliding, in not only in Indonesia but in a global area. And I think I want to go back to Ali Akbar Navis again, even though he came from a different generation, but I think I really agree with Fai that actually if we read Navis, not only his short story, but also his articles like Alam Terkembang Jadi Guru. Actually, he already analysis or remind us that cosmopolitanism, Indonesia will always be in a tension. He didn't say Indonesia, but he described it like in Minangkabau. Is already always in a tension. So we are always in a tension. And in Minangkabau, the tension is between the tradition at his time, the tradition and the modernization, but modernization have to branch. The Islamic modernization and the Western modernization. And I think what Navis suggests us is to realize the kind of tension we are living in, and the decision will be always individual. I mean, Pram will have his own decision or his own position. Sitor will have, and Navis also have his own stand. But the important thing is that we realize that we are always in a tension.
Oh, that was I use. But the only thing I wanted to say is that, you know, for someone from your generations and mine, by implication, what happened this year is something that would have been unthinkable some years ago. So the question is not whether this or that guy, you know, has to be, you know, it's what happened so that this became possible. One explanation could be that right from the start, Reformasi was not just about democratic enlargement, but that involved something else, you know, crafting a new sense of nationalism, crafting new Islamic identities, and that it was much more complicated than what we thought, so to speak, and that what happens today is, in a sense, also a logical development of, you know, a lot of things. But I just wanted your comment about that, because it came, in a sense, as a surprise.
Well, back in 1998, late 1990s, I mean, there was a big hope of change, for the better, of course, right? What I think many of us did not expect is that there were competing ideas and interests of defining what the future of Indonesian would be, right? And many of us were not prepared of the different possibilities. I mean, we did not foresee, for example, the Islamic Defenders Front. We did not foresee the emergence of local rulers who would not represent the interest of the local people, but actually bringing the interest of the central or the elite, the oligarchy, etc., to the local level. I mean, we did not foresee that. So there are many things that we did not foresee in terms of like thinking about better Indonesia in the future. And I think we were caught on surprised by all these developments. And I think the biggest challenge then was that how to take roots. I mean, all these like good ideas about reform, about democracy, etc. Like how are they going to be rooted in the society? And I remember a very interesting conversation that I had with the famous Islamic political figure at the time. When we were in a panel like this, right? We were talking about democracy and all these good things about Indonesia in the future. And his response was more or less like this. I like your ideas, all very good, etc. But how far are your ideas actually welcomed in the community? How rooted are your ideas about the good Indonesia, the better Indonesia in the society? And I said, like, yeah, well, we are just a group of people interested in discussing democracy, but with little connection with the grassroots, actually, no? So that was actually missing, I think. Yeah, like very great ideas about reformasi, democracy, etc., limited to yeah, you would say like a small circles of intellectuals spread out all over Indonesia, but too small actually to have an impact on the society at large. So that was the gap. Yeah, and I think reflecting on that in 2024, the recent development just, yeah, natural consequences of the lack of relationship that these big ideas about democracy had with the grassroots level. So, yeah.
Well, the example that you took of the Islamic Defenders Front, the FPI, for instance, as far as I can remember, is an interesting one because, in a sense, if you really want to understand this movement in the terms that it saw itself as being part of the reform movement, moral reform.
Yeah.
And there could even be a kind of working misunderstanding between this kind of harshly moralizing grassroots forces and the overall, you know, democracy as a new language agenda shared among intellectuals and highly professional political actors. So everybody could, you know, apply for reformasi, but with very different set of expectations, and that it kept, you know, this expectation, you know, being active in the country could help explain also, because that's just the story of just, you know, one guy winning the presidency. It's a whole political field that keeps undulating. And I say that, you know, being part of a country where we had a lot of political surprises this year also. One more remark or comment on this or anything else?
Well, yeah, that's exactly my point. I mean, we were caught unprepared because we thought that people would incline towards democracy by nature. They don't, right? I mean, you had an opportunity to reframe, to rethink, to redefine what Indonesia is, right? And we didn't foresee that, like coming from a completely different direction, moral criticism, which is right in a way. I mean, they are representing grassroots anxiety, so to say, you know, and the answer doesn't come from this democratic camp with all their noble ideas about change, etc., but comes from a completely different direction. But it takes root in the community, and it's very, yeah, it's proven to be very strong. So yeah, I completely agree with you on that.
Are you? Would you like to make a last comment or remark before we open for the queue? Okay. So now I will give the floor to the audience. Maybe someone can circulate the mic among people who want to ask questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, for those who wants to ask a few questions, you could press the red button on the mic. Yes.
Thank you for this talk. I'd like to ask, how would you say it would have influenced A.A. Navis's writing if he lived in Jakarta?
Okay, we can collect some more. Okay.
Hello, good evening for you guys all. je me présente, izinkan saya memperkenalkan diri saya. My name is Alifa Zahra, and now I'm studying in French literature, master in second year, master at Sorbonne University. So, as we know, and as we have seen also in Ayu Utami and A.A. Navis works, they are often highlight and address issues of identity, tradition, and gender, which are often taboo themes in adult literature and, of course, in children's literature. That's very interesting when Madam Ayu Utami talk a little bit about children's literature, because now my research in Indonesia from when I was bachelor degree until now always talk about children's literature. And if we talk about minorities, not only women, also children are also part of group that we can call it an or sociolog classified into minority groups. Additionally, as we know also here, the development of children literature in Indonesia is sometimes abandoned. I'm so sorry to say this, because I see there are a lot of gaps, because here in French, there are a lot of centres nationaux, for example, SRLG, Centre de Recherche de Littérature de Jeunesse, mais en Indonésie, il n'y en a pas. It doesn't exist. Maybe one day in Indonesia, we can create a Centre de Recherche like in French. Monsieur. And so the question is, how the children's literature in Indonesia start to found it and raise awareness. Yes, raise awareness from literature, surtout, especially literature de jeunesse. How to support the development of higher quality children's literature in Indonesia, and of course, of speaking this taboo, this theme taboos like Madam Ayu and Monsieur Navis that I always read also, because I highlight also about the feminism critics, about your movement, literature parfumée. Yeah, that's all I think. Sorry for my broken English, but that's all. Merci beaucoup.
Maybe we collect a third question before giving you the floor to answer. Yeah.
Well, thank you for the time you have given. My name is Aril Alvizahri. I am a student at Islamic State University of Maulana Malik Ibrahim Malang, Indonesia. Sorry, I'm nervous here. I am a student at Sharia Economic Law at Islamic State University of Maulana Malik Ibrahim Malang. Of course, as a law student, of course, we must have critical thinking, especially given the current condition of our nation, Indonesia. Learn from the story of Ali Akbar Navis, what is a good way to become a critical person for the progress of our nation, especially a young man who is really hurt. Maybe that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, so if Navis was born in Jakarta, children literature, the question of taboos in your work, and how to become and stay a young critical man, right? The floor is yours.
Thank you for the question. What if Navis was born in Jakarta and right in Jakarta? I think there is some missing. There's something missing, but probably he can substitute it with other things. I believe that he's a very creative person that will see. I believe that he will write about the kampung in Jakarta. And there are lots of materials to write about kampung in Jakarta. There are many interesting things. But I think there is he will miss something, because the situation in Minangkabau is not, it has a specialties. I think if we read his analysis about Minangkabau, Minangkabau is a matriarchal society, and Jakarta is not. And again, this tension he mentioned, actually he described in his short stories, but also he explained it in his article, he said that only Minangkabau person or people probably who has this who criticize or even curse the tradition. So the Minangkabau in Navis work, both in the short stories and in the articles, you see the tension, the intense, the tension of an ethnic group within this tug of war between the tradition and the modernization, but the modernization is again branches into Islamic modernization and Western modernization. I think he will miss this in Jakarta because it is not the situation in Jakarta. I think Minangkabau has a very specific or particular description about this is through the story of Malin Kundang, the problem between son and mother, and also in one of Navis' story, he put it the other way around. It was the son who cursed the mother. But this relation is not found in other ethnicity in Indonesia. So I think it is better that Navis were not born in Jakarta. I think it's just good that he was born in Minangkabau. And the second question about children's literature, I think the big problem with children's literature in Indonesia is that the way Indonesians educate or present the children's story is too didactic. I think this is one of the reasons why the Indonesian literature class is not interesting for the students. I mean, who find literature class interesting at school? At school? Yeah, only a very few. Even I didn't find it interesting because the approach is too didactic. Usually, if you find the literature class interesting, it is because of the teacher, because your teacher is special, not because of the curriculum is good. So I think this is my opinion, looking at many materials of children literature, it's too didactic. It's too didactic and moralistic. It doesn't continue to the question. It doesn't really want to develop a critical thinking. Its understanding of morality and morality is right or wrong. And I think this set of mind has to be changed and giving it more open for children to appreciate the not morality, but experience, like sensual, not sensual in the sense of sexuality, but bodily experience, because through your experience you find something, you develop fantasy, and I think this is still not the approach. And Yeah, and I think Indonesians also tend to see all the legend as children's story while they are not. I mean, all these mythology or legends like Malin Kundang or Sangkuriang, all these traditional local stories were treated as children's story, which they are not at all. So I think there is some, yeah, I think now ada Pak Amin. This is really a message for you because yeah, we need a new approach for children writing. Yeah, and I think with the last question, I think one that we can learn from Ali Akbar Navis about critical thinking is that he actually invites us to see the broader context. With Ali Akbar Navis, the short story doesn't invite us to tap moral story easily, but the stories invite us to see the broader context. And I think one of the critical thinking that we need to do is to see the problems in a broader context.
Well, first question, what if Ali Akbar Navis was born in Jakarta instead of in Minangkabau? Very interesting thought. Answer to that, I don't know what would happen. But the chances that he might go to a school that is not as good as his school was in West Sumatra, in NS Kayu Tanam. Kayu Tanam was a very special school. I don't think that Taman Siswa in Jakarta would match or would even like par with the ENS Kayu Tanam in that regard. So what I would think of Navis writing from Jakarta is that he would have a very different perspective on things. A good example in comparison to Navis is probably Pramudia, who wrote in the early 1950s about his experiences in Jakarta. Very dark, very unpleasant, and all these problems living in a rapidly moving city like Jakarta. So, and I would assume that Navis would probably have that similar experience, living in a kampung. There's a chance, even though he was educated, like had a good education, that he would live in a kampung in Jakarta instead of being part of the Jakarta elite. Pramudia would probably be the best match to what this interesting thought you do have of Navis being born in Jakarta. Children literature, you're really right, it's very important, and the problem is that we have not enough of writers with an interest in children literature. I mean, if you go to bookstores today, then you would see like shelves being filled with comic books, Japanese comic books, mostly manga and all that. Nothing against that, but yeah, again, I mean, we need more people dedicating their time, because children literature is not like an adult interested in writing about book for children. And I know this from my experience. I started my career writing when I was in high school, translating children books from English into Indonesia. Great writers, Astrid Lindgren, Pippi Longstocking in English, I think, I don't know what's in French, and Enid Blyton and all these like writers. So we don't have that in Indonesia, I think. Back in the 50s, 40s, then you still have writers with Balai Pustaka, no? But that's all gone. The answer to that, Pak Amin is here, so he's the person in charge of that. I'd like to hear your response actually to that question as well. How to be critical? Just don't put limit on your thoughts. Just dare to ask, to question, even things that you actually believe. And this is a very, I think, important standpoint, that you dare to question, to rethink things that you believe. Yeah? Your own beliefs, much more important than criticizing others. Just keep questioning, and then look at the world with an open mind. Yeah? And yeah, get different perspectives in life. That's very important. Yeah, I think we tend to listen to things that we like, and in the end, then we live in bubbles. Yeah, that we create ourselves, and it's very important to break these bubbles so that you can have an open relationship with different ideas. And yeah, this is based on my own experience.
I think we may have time left for 2 more questions. Yeah?
Okay. So it's just a bit response of Madam Ayu Utami that say that it's too didactic and it's too moralistic if we talk about children's literature in Indonesia. But so what's the goals now? And when we write the children's literature, the goal is to sensibilize, to educate them, to raise awareness also about the taboo themes like the gender roles, the relation, the rapport de pouvoir. What is it in English? And yeah, the dynamic of relation between men and women, like that. So they will I cannot do this and I can do that, right? Because children's literature
really
is...
Go to the point, because we have only a few minutes left, and that's the second time you ask a question.
The question is, what is the goal then if we don't talk about moralistic or too didactic, and if we talk about experience and we only talk about the adult experience or how in children's literature? Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Good afternoon. I'd like to present myself. My name is Melina. Currently, I'm doing my PhD in literary translation at INALCO in Paris. I'm interested in seeing our title today, the title of our conference, The Shaping of Modern Indonesia, Thinking Indonesia with A.A. Navis. I would like to emphasize on the word modern Indonesia. Today we talk about A.A. Navis, the fact that he was born in a small village in Sumatra. He wrote in the 50s, and also you mentioned a couple of times about regional aspects in his works. So my question is, how do you define this word modern, especially combined with Indonesia, regarding this fact? And not only in A.A. Navis' case, but also all authors from the same generation as A.A. Navis. And second question is is it really necessary to mention the word modern Indonesia? Is it not enough to say just Indonesia? Thank you.
I think we have to stop, because otherwise, there could be no answer to these 3 questions, actually. Maybe to get back to that point of, defining or not the modern in Indonesia. Modernity becoming quite an antiquated word by now, actually. So, Hilmar, do you want to go first? Because you touched upon this question earlier on.
Well, first of all, the title is not our liking. It's not ours. So, but I think modern is a way for you to look at history. I mean, compared to tradition. So you put it in a temporal context. Yeah. Tradition, and you have modernity and all that. And I think the point here is to really look at what modern means in an Indonesian context. Yeah. And as I said before, there are many ways of connecting or engaging with modernity. Yeah. And in our context, it was European colonialism that brought in modern ways of thinking, modern science, technology, and all that. And they wanted to define Indonesia according to their way of dealing with modernity. And normally people would think, back in the 1970s, there was modernization theory. Yeah, and Indonesia was considered as a backward society. It needs to be modernized by bringing in technology, media, and all that, in order to for them to be able to leave that backwardness behind and embrace modernity. And we know from our experience, it's a wrong way to go, right? I mean, it's not like you're introducing something and then you embrace it fully, then you become modern. And now we are doing research. I mean, more historians and people are looking into history of Indonesia and see that actually we had a very interesting relationships in the plural with modernity. Sources are also different. It's not only Europe. Yeah, there was the Arab world, India, China back in the 1950s brought like different ideas about like what modern is, being modern is, etc., etc. So a very dynamic relationship with modernity. And I think what is interesting of putting that title is that to keep thinking about it. Yeah, I mean, you don't take things at face value or take things for granted. And exactly by putting that title, I think there are new avenues to think about Indonesia today by looking at the history, and it means that you will also have like different views on what Indonesia would be like in the future.
Are you?
Yeah, about modern Indonesia, it's interesting, but I think it's exactly that we should not define it in a simple term. Because if we go back to the first polemic about Indonesian identity in the 1930s, it is exactly, and this polemic will repeat, it is between a group that believed that Indonesia is a continuation from the previous kingdoms, or another group who believed that Indonesia is a new modern identity formed in the beginning of the 20th century. And I think we have to accept these two positions and let it be the wealth, the richness for us to always debate. Because the problem will always repeat, and it repeats in the 50s, 80s, 90s. So I think let the debate be open. Yeah, I think that's the question. That's I think for me the answer. And I think we go back, because we are now celebrating Ali Akbar Navis. I think we go back to Navis' position that the controversy is there, the dilemma is there. The choice is always particular for certain group, certain individual in a certain moment. And at a certain moment, you choose what is the best for the particular moment. So please don't try to answer it in a simple way. I think regarding again, very short about children's literature, I think what is important in children's literature is not to tell what is right or wrong or to tell to them, but to let them experience something that they can find what is right or wrong for themselves. I think the goal is to open a playground for them, safe enough without their knowing it, and they can find their answers.
Thank you. Well, we've reached the end of this round table. Once again, I want to thank you very much, wholeheartedly, for your participation in this event and discussion today. Thank you.
I thank you very much for this event and for inviting us in the event.
Thank you, Monsieur Romain, Mr. Hilmar, dan Mrs. Ayu. Please stay in your seat for a while. And I would like to ask for the photographers to take a small photo session with the moderator and speakers, please. Please stand up for a big photo session from the stage. Okay, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, distinguished speakers. As we bring this event to a close, I would like to thank everyone who contributed to making today's discussion possible. Your presence and participation have truly enriched our commemoration of A.A. Navis' legacy. With that, we shall end the event by inviting you for a cocktail reception on the 7th floor if you wish to continue for the informal discussion and socializing. I thank you once again for excellencies, honored guests, and distinguished speakers for your participation and attention for our event. Hopefully, we shall meet again in the near future.